8 years of Liberal waste and corruption have driven inflation to record highs, and nowhere is this more obvious than in housing costs. In fact, after 8 years of Liberal deficits driving up inflation, the average renter now pays over $2,000 a month in rent. Now, to a wealthy Prime Minister who brags about his vast family fortune, that might not seem like a lot of money. Maybe that's why he signed off on a $7,000 a night hotel stay in London last fall. Why did the Prime Minister think it was okay to bill taxpayers for a single night's hotel bill what the average renter pays in 3 full months?
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians have the right to ask themselves, why is it that every time real supports for renters comes to the floor of this House, that the Conservatives vote against it? They voted against the Canada Housing Benefit that is delivering and investing an average of $2,500 to vulnerable renters across the country. They not only voted against the $500 one-time top-up to the Canada Housing Benefit, they played procedural games in this chamber to prevent real help to Canadian renters.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, this scandal stings taxpayers so much because it comes at a time when housing costs are taking more and more out of Canadian paychecks. After 8 years of Liberal deficits, interest rates have risen, meaning homeowners have to pay more to the bank in interest payments just to stay in their own home. In fact, after 8 years of this Liberal government, the average monthly mortgage cost has more than doubled, and the average $600,000 mortgage sees interest costs go from $12,000 a year to over $30,000 a year. So again, does the minister think it was a good idea for the Prime Minister to bill taxpayers for one night's hotel stay what homeowners pay in 2 full months on their mortgage?
The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, does the honourable member think it was smart to vote against real help for home buyers? The first-time home buyer incentive, $40,000 tax-free savings account for first-time home buyers, doubling the first-time home buyer tax credit, introducing a once-in-a-lifetime rent-to-own program, $200 million, supports for first-time home buyers in terms of increasing supply, banning foreigners from owning Canadian residential real estate. Does the honourable member really think those supports for Canadian home buyers were smart to vote against? Thank you.
Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
It's always smart to vote against inflationary deficits that drive up the cost of living, Mr. Speaker. You know, the Liberals have learned the wrong lesson from this hotel bill scandal. You'd think that after billing taxpayers $6,000 a night for a single room, the lesson learned would be book a cheaper room next time. Instead, the lesson these Liberals have learned is cover it up better. Emails between the PM staff revealed government officials scheming to cover up the scandal. One even suggested bearing these costs in next year's public accounts. And the word finally came down from the minister herself to simply stop answering questions altogether. All this at a time when Canadians are paying more just to stay in their own home. Why is treating taxpayers' money with respect nevertheless?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last fall, Canadians mourned the death of a monarch of 70 years. And we had a delegation led by our Governor-General and our Prime Minister that was appropriate and was important for Canadians. It was absolutely essential that we attend that. And while this side of the House is focusing on us, we're focusing on them. We're focusing on their cost of living. We're focusing on their cost of housing. We're focused on their cost of childcare. And we will continue to be focusing on the Canadians while they focus on us.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Les Etchemins, and Lévis. So we see that they think it's normal to spend $6,000 for a night at a hotel. After 8 years of this government, Canadians are hurting financially. Inflation is rampant, and today we're debating a motion that calls on the government to rein in its spending, stop the waste, and eliminate the taxes and deficits that gave way to the current cost of living crisis. Will this government finally do the right thing and introduce the fiscal and budgetary measures that are necessary to get the country out of this disastrous inflationary crisis, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister for Sport. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives talk about overspending and waste. What is this really about? Our spending seeks to help families who really need help. Our programs are targeted and adapted to help those who really need it the most in our society. For example, Our $500 top-up to the Canada Housing Benefit, that aims to help people who need it. We are making housing affordable for families. We are helping those who need help the most. The Conservatives should stop voting against all the measures that we are implementing to help Canadians, and maybe they should propose some solutions. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. Well, one solution to help would be to not spend $6,000 for a hotel room. Mr. Speaker, food banks, after 8 years of this government, are experiencing a record number of visits, 1.5 million visits in 1 month. A family of 4 will have to pay $1,065 more for food this year than they did last year. 1 in 5 mothers is skipping meals in Canada. Mr. Speaker, this mess bears the signature of this incompetent government whose mistakes and failures continue to pile up. When will they finally show some compassion and clean up their mess, fix the situation? The Honourable Minister. I'd like to remind my colleague that when this party took office in 2015, 1 in 8 Canadians was living under the poverty line. Since we took office, we have lifted 2.7 million Canadians above the poverty line. So the Conservatives say that we should stop spending and stop helping Canadians. What they're really saying is that we should send those 2.7 million back under the poverty line. It's unacceptable, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, the Central Okanagan Food Bank has over 350 more seniors in the last 60 days seeking help. After 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, local animal shelters are so full as they can no longer afford to care for their pets. After 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, many of my residents can no longer afford their mortgage payments. After 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, citizens in my riding can no longer afford their monthly gas and propane heating bills. After 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, my constituents can no longer afford his runaway deficits and inflation, and most certainly we can't afford them to lose hope. After 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, more and more Canadians, Mr. Speaker, are lining up to hear the Conservative leader's message for turning all this hurt into hope. Under his leadership, Canadians will have a Prime Minister who will put their paychecks, their savings, their homes, and their country first. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, Canadians are out of money and can't afford to eat, heat, or house themselves because of the failed NDP Liberal policies that are breaking this country. After 8 years, paychecks dwindle with out-of-control Liberal tax increases. After 8 years, spending power dwindles as inflation runs rampant due to out-of-control NDP Liberal spending. And after 8 years, drug overdoses are up. Thugs with smuggled guns are terrorizing our communities, and the number of people living on the street continues to rise. After 8 years, Canadians feel how broken this country has become. However, we can recover. Conservatives will crack down on crime. We will go after the gun smugglers, tackle the gang problem, and reform the revolving door bail system. Conservatives will end the inflation crisis and make it more affordable to fuel your car and heat your home. How? Instead of constantly increasing the carbon tax, Conservatives will keep the heat on and take the tax off.